Got more than a quorum. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. All those of you participating through the phone or internet, thank you for joining us. Let's just see who is joining us by Zoom.
We have Mayor Kafusi, Councilmember White, Mayor Christensen, Councilmember Mendenhall, and Mayor Wilson Edwards. We also have Mayor Arden and Dave Sanderson joining us via Zoom.
That's awesome. Thank you all for joining us, and on a busy summer morning, and we've got lunch here. We would gladly send you some if you do that. Nick, what do you think? Should we fax?
We're not quite there on the technology, but we are working with Willy Wonka Industries to send that through.
Well, good. I'd like to start off, if we could, recognizing that we've got Roger too with us, and more importantly, his better half, Paula, who's just walking in the door. She's walking around and helping. Thank you, Paula, for being here. I'd like to take a minute, since they're here right now up front, if we could. And Cameron, I'd like you to chime in anytime you want, but we just want to take a minute and thank Roger and Paula. They've together had just an incredible impact over the last few years in particular, but over the last 30, on the League of Cities and Towns. And so we're not announcing anything in terms of a retirement or anything like that. We're just, but I would like to thank both of them. Oh, it's going to get better. I'd like to thank both of them for, as a team, really helping to make this building happen. We're sitting in this room that we could never have been sitting in with this technology. And by the way, I hope the sound is better this time. We've got some new microphones.
Yep, and one thing I'll add, Mayor, is that there will be panels on the wall that are being installed in July. So by the August meeting, the panels will be on the wall to help with the ULCT, and then we purchase new microphones that should work. So hopefully people can hear us better online. Even though I don't have a voice, everything else should be working better.
Good.
And Meg, will you close that door? Just we can help with the input.
Anyway, Roger, in his relatively short tenure as the executive director, the interim executive director, filled a critical role. It could not have gone better. I don't know, some of you that weren't board members at the time, I just have to let you know, and others can nod and in agreement, I know they will. It had to be perfect, and it was, because we had Roger. And Roger did not need to say yes, but he did. I don't know why he did. He did, I think, in this very room, said yes. Is that right?
No. There was moving around.
It didn't look like this. But
I seem to recall no wasn't an option.
It was presented, there is no plan B.
Yes, that is very true, right, Mayor? There really wasn't a plan B. So we're grateful you said yes. It sort of was just another piece, not a culminating piece, another piece of Roger's impact on the league. And as part of that, he really saw a great need and felt I'll just say kind of a quest, like he had to help us with this remodel. It was so important, he felt, and the board agreed to get this done under his watch. You got to say, as a new executive director, that is a tough thing to do, and Roger knew that. Roger knew if he could help us get it done and work through the difficulties and gathering the funds, approving the funds, going through the project, it would be one less big thing that a new executive director would have to worry about. And that was really thoughtful. And then he had the wisdom to bring in Paula to help him with so many details. And I think everything you see has Paula's handprints, not literally, but on it. And so the detail, the color, the furniture, the artwork and things that so far been placed, Paula's had everything to do with that. So we just thought, well, shoot, Nick's gonna help me. We'd like to name this the Roger and Paula 2 Conference. And Roger, I don't know if you didn't notice that. We were afraid you'd notice. What is that cloth doing up on the wall? Clean things up around here, Cameron and Nick. So we had that plaque crafted, and that's what it will, from here forward to thereafter, be named the Roger and Paula 2 Conference Room. So thank you. Cameron, what did I leave out?
No, you nailed it. So I wanted to emphasize this was not a retirement speech.
That's right.
And this is a working conference room, Raj. So we look forward to many more deliberations and discussions here. But again, thank you for everything that you've both done to help us modernize the organization, both structurally and physically, and excited about the future.
Exactly right. And this is a classic space. How many of you have never been to the former space? Raise your hand. Okay, so just trust us, it needed to be. Okay, it had been
tables and lawn chairs.
Yeah, it was reminded me just a little bit of MASH, some of the furniture, Anyway, it was greatly needed, and I really believe the staff appreciates it too. Is that right, everybody?
Very much so.
I mean, it was well deserved. You guys were living in interesting conditions. I hope this is a lot better, feels better to me. So anyway, all right, that's really all we need to do today. No, we do need a few more things.
Yes. Paula didn't support you here. Because she doesn't like to drive a lot of places. So I just took the check on it.
Good work, Paul.
She said, I really didn't have that much to do, which is just absolutely untrue. That door is where I did. So anyway, thank you. I'm not retiring yet. Thank you
Thank you. Paul, anything you want to say?
If you didn't like it, it wasn't my idea. I only did the things you like.
Well, I like it all. So I think it's just really, as Cameron said, it's really modernized our look and feel, and that's important, And we're going to talk about the website a little later, which is, as we said, the other, front door that we have. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but really important. Image is important, and I'm very proud to be able to have our staff meet here, work here, and bring anyone here. Governor or whoever, we're happy to host them here, and I feel it's the right mix. It's just nice enough, and it's it's not over the top, but it's just nice enough. It's classy, it's modern, it's everything we need to be. It's sharp. So, all right. Well, we are, as you all know, we are required to hold a public hearing regarding the fiscal year 2020 budget. And so we have advertised that as required by state law. And so what I guess probably the thing I would do at this time is, well, do we have a handout? I guess everyone's got it here digitally. But is there anyone here? I'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here that would like to make a comment regarding the budget. Is this like your city councils, most of you? You pass I'm trying to think I think we had 3 people come to ours this year, and that was like, it's just a little $275 million thing,
We had the same in the two people that came spoke about urban shades. So.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and ours spoke about pickleball, and it was in the budget, by the way, to redo a couple old pickleball courts, and and the other one, I can't remember what it was. Oh, we were socialists, and they wanted us to slash the budget in half. So we weren't very nice, apparently. If there are no comments from the public, then I'll close the public hearing. And anything you want to say about it, Cameron or Nick?
We'll get to the budget.
Yep, later. Okay, then we will go on, and has anyone had a chance to review, I hope, the minutes? And if so, from April 24th and May 3rd and May 20th. If so, I'd entertain a motion, or if there are any corrections that need to be made, please note that for us.
Mayor, one point, as you noticed in the email, we were expecting to have those two sets of minutes from April 24th and May 3rd from the Municipal Clerks Association today. They were not able to get those in for us, so we will have to approve those at a later meeting, but we do have the May 20th minutes that was included in the packet.
So it's just that one. Any corrections? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
Thank you, Mayor Talbot, and Mayor Caldwell seconds the motion. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Say nay. Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. Those in the room and those on Zoom for participating in that vote. Let's go to conflict of interest. As you all know, this is kind of just housekeeping. We want to make sure if there's anything on the agenda that any of us as board members might have a conflict, that we just so note that now. Gives our David Church a chance to say if we need to recuse ourselves or anything. So any conflicts today? Hearing and seeing none, then we'll move on to number 5, which is board and commission reports and appointments. And so today I'm going to turn it over to, let's see, right to Abby. Okay, so Abby's going to talk about, I think in particular, some new appointments.
Yes, I'll stand here for her to see me. So Brandon Smith previously had this role, I'm taking it over. So we have about 5 different boards we have vacancies on. They're in your board packets. There's some more details there. We'll give you descriptions on everything just as we have a short amount of time. Those different boards include, there's the Private Activity Bond Review Board, the Mental Health Protections for First Responders Work Group, Rural Online Working Hub Grant Advisory Committee, Utah Commission on Aging, Utility Facility Review Board. It's a mouthful. So right now we're still soliciting applications for the Private Activity Bond, the Mental Health Protections for First Responders, and the Utility Facility Review Board. We have received about 4 recommendations from Wayne Parker of Provo for the Private Activity Bond. Those recommendations are in your packet, but they are Ryan Harvey from West Point. He's the Administrative Services Director. Bruce Riddle, Finance Director of Springville. Lane Weeks, Finance Director of Centerville, and Jacob Smith, who's the Management Services Director in Centerville as well. And then the next one for the Rural Online Working Hubs Grant, we received an application from, his name is Stephen Dunn. He's a council member in Annabella. And then this morning we received 2 late applications. Those are from Brian Snow, who's the city manager of Roosevelt, as well as Stephen Cox. I can go over their different qualifications now, later, if you guys have any questions. And then the next one we had, so the Utah Commission on Aging, we received 5 applications, and we brought, kind of decided on 2 of those we'd like to go over. The first one, her name's Amy Anderson. She's a council member in Logan. She's kind of in the health administration area, focusing on long-term care since 2012. She's worked in hospice, focused on Alzheimer's and dementia. And then Dustin, he went to Delaware Law School, postgrad studies on healthcare law, and then works for the Utah Department of Health, serves on the state's medical review board, also 9 years as home health care manager. And then
And he's a city council member.
yes, Swimmer in Midvale. And then last one, hopefully it's not too much information. The Utility Facility Review Board, spoke with Beth Holbrook. She served on that board last year. We just wanted to see if she recommended a staff member or elected official. She recommended a staff member just because a little bit hard to catch up on that information. If you're not familiar, she mentioned energy generation, and then just city, county government in general. Let's see. So I think that's it. If you guys just want to decide on the applications for the Utah Commission on Aging, as well as the Rural Online Working Hubs grant. And let's see. Do you have any other recommendations in general?
And Mark Pike, I'll jump in. We've been providing more responsibility to Abby as part of her role as membership coordinator. The league's responsible for over 40 appointments on boards and commissions, and often legislation comes out of these boards and commissions. And so by having Abby as membership coordinator, try to solicit as much information as possible and have this two-way dialogue, hopefully that'll help us in our legislative efforts. As you saw though, even when we solicited requests, we didn't get enough in for all of the vacancies we have. So our recommendation to you today is to let us keep those vacant that we didn't get applications for and work with the officers to fill them. And then, the recommendation, she listed the 2 individuals for the Commission on Aging to put forward to the governor's office. And then with the Rural Online Working Hubs, we have the 1 individual who got his application in by our internal deadline, and then 2 who got in this morning. So if you'd rather wait until we can vet those other 2, we can work through the officers and get those appointed between now and the next meeting in August.
Is a formal motion required?
Just formal motion to adopt the recommendation on the Commission on Aging, and then on the, if you want to endorse the recommendation from the council member Annabella, that was part of the materials, or if you want us to wait until we can vet those other 2 and work with the officers.
So board, and again, we could as a full board, as Cameron has indicated, allow the executive committee to make those final appointments, correct, Cameron? Once the others are vetted, so that we don't have to wait till August for our next meeting.
Yeah, the governor's office is getting anxious to fill them.
Yeah. So, any comments, discussion? I have a motion. Yes.
Just a couple of quick things. I know Amy from her service on the Logan City Council. She is awesome. She'll do a fantastic job on that board. I just emailed someone else from Cache Valley about the mental health for first responders, who is the Logan Fire Marshal and a newly named member of the Logan City Council, who would be awesome. And so if I hear back from him, I'd like to be able to relay that to you guys for consideration. But I'm fully on board with ratifying these guys and then letting these coordinate the final decision on the other 2.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it was.
I have a motion by Damon and a second by Brett. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Sounds good. All right, that motion carries. And so again, we'll just allow, as you indicated, Cameron, you to vet the others and then the ones that were vetted or approved.
Perfect. Well, and thanks to Abby for taking this on. See, this is a way to help build a backbench of local government leaders as well. So,
Yes.
So thank you.
All right, next is actually, we'll just, I think, have a little bit of discussion on the proposed 2020 fiscal year 2020 budget by Cameron and Nick. And then after the review, we'll ask for a motion to adopt it. Today is the day.
Yep, today is the day. There are no changes since the discussion we had at the May board meeting. Answer questions.
Yeah, as you'll see, as I mentioned in the memo, you'll see 2 documents in there, just because we're changing the formatting to better align with QuickBooks. That way we don't just have to waste some time moving lines around. So you'll see both. You'll see the one that was adopted, dated with the older format, and then you'll see what we put forward as that I've titled the proposed budget as opposed to the tentative budget that just changes a little bit of that formatting. No numbers have changed, and we're still overall looking at a $2,894,000 budget.
Are there any questions by members of the board? Nick did exactly what he said he was going to do, showing it in both formats. And we had this information for a while, which again was by design, so we got a chance to look through and ask any questions in the interim or today.
I'll make a motion to adopt the proposed FY 2020 budget.
Second. We have a motion by Gary and a second by Mayor Caldwell to adopt the fiscal year 2020 budget. Correct? Any discussion on the motion? This is a resolution. Doesn't say. So I'll just say all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously from what I can tell. Congratulations, Nick and Cameron.
We've got a budget.
Well, we've got a budget.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the hard work.
We know something about that, something. Gary knows a lot about that. But we appreciate the work and realize it's
And the level of transparency.
yeah, it's greatly improved. And along those lines, Nick, do you want to go through the check register? with
Yes,
us?
indeed. The next part of transparency. So you'll see in your packet, we have both April and May check registers, as well as the credit card charges from both of those months. I have, we got a little too ambitious and already filed our April checks. So if you do have a specific charge in April that you have a question on, Abby can just run in there and pull it out of the file. I do have all the May checks that we've got to file right here, and all the documentation on the credit card expenses. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those now.
Any questions by the board? So great to have this. Anything that stood out for you, Nick, that you'd want to highlight? Nothing really odd.
No, you'll notice we probably, because of mid-year, you'll see staff members' names on there as reimbursements. You don't see our paychecks on here typically, but those reimbursements are initially approved by me, and it's a CAM reimbursement. It's my reimbursement. CAM approves that, and it's CAM's reimbursement. I approve it to get the check made, and then Mayor RV has to officially approve that.
You have receipts?
And we do, yes, indeed. Yep, we have people tape the receipts on there, and I'm a stickler about that.
And all jokes aside, Mayor Harvey he looks at everything and makes sure that everything's in order before he approves it as well. So Nick and I both approve it, and then you have Mayor Harvey providing that check.
Love the extra controls, and always good to have the documentation.
Additionally, with staff reimbursements, after they've already gone through and been checked by everyone, we recheck them. Carrie Nakamura, our external financial consultant, goes back and looks at those, because that just seems like an area that we've had issues with in the past that could possibly rise up. So we want to make sure we are check, double and triple check.
I have a question.
Yes.
More of a comment. So I noticed that on the door of the building says Spatafor Design, and then it's also on the, obviously we buy designs, work from them. What's the connection to ULCT?
We are the owner of this space, and there are 4 spaces within this building, and then we belong to the condo association. So we're here, Spatafor Design is next door, and then the other side of the building is owned by Fox Lane Pignelli. So we were actually tenants of Fox Lane Pignelli during our temporary space, even though we were still owning this space, and now we're back here. Part of the reason you don't see our name on the building is we've never spent the money to advertise. We did put our name on the door, so people come in, they know where we are. Anything that is external is a condo association expense. And in fact, we're in negotiations right now with the condo association about this common area in the entrance, bathrooms, and the common areas in the back, because that all has to be done by the condo association. So our relationship with Spatafor is that we both belong to the condo association, and then they do some of our graphic design work for conferences, our legislative wrap-up book, and other graphic design. So we are a customer in certain cases, and then we're both tenants within the condo association.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. I just thought it was just such an interesting, like, almost like a partnership or something, so I just wanted to make sure I knew the relationship. Thank you.
Just a comment, and I'm not here to make more work for Nick and staff, but every once in a while, when you're looking at checks, it's just, most of the time it's associated with an invoice number. Most of us don't know what that is unless we specifically maybe call and ask. I would just like to recommend that between Cameron and staff, if there is an item that comes on that might bear some discussion, then maybe there's maybe a blurb on another page or something saying, or do you want to cover so that we do this? Because I know that even when I look at the checks at the city, I see basically the same thing, and then I have to hunt out, our CFO or whatever, and ask them, what is this specifically? And most of the time it's not anything. But once in a while there's something that we probably ought to discuss a little bit more. And so maybe just a little snapshot of this invoice details this, just in case you have any information. On most things, probably not. But on some things, if you deem it necessary, I think it would be helpful to discuss it.
Definitely, and we'll have, so when Abby inputs those checks that we've approved the invoices, we do need to keep that invoice number on there just so it's easier for us to track it down, but we will just in the memo put, for Spatafor, for example, on those we could put mid-year design, invoice mid-year design, something like
A little more of a description.
Well, yes, and if there's something that really, we need to be really made aware of other than just looking at this, you say that you really need to be aware of this. I think a little bit more description or discussion would be helpful, just so that we're not caught in the dark.
We just probably get a field within the software and just have a quick one-line description of each check.
I don't believe so, but there is that memo section so we'd have to just have them both in that memo section. So there definitely is a place where you can put it. I don't think there's like memo and then notes separately. However, I can export this. What I'd like to do is just keep it straight out of the software so it's not messed with or tampered by employees. What I can do is export it and put it into a different kind of template where we could have that comment section on the side.
Well, I'm not asking you to do it on everyone. At your discretion, there may be something that, or Cameron's discretion, or the board may say, well, let's make sure everybody understands this. For the most part, I'm just fine with the invoice. They're typical things that would come about. I don't want to make more work of that, but if there's something you put on.
Some of the bigger items or
some
more
of the items,
unique.
put it on if you got something for 200,000, you may want to discuss that.
Yep, certainly.
So Nick, I'm trying to remember, I assume you're doing this at QuickBooks?
Yes.
Could you
QuickBooks
just
Online.
add a column in there that shows the account and the nature of the expense, so we know if it's advertising or repairs or employee?
We could, if that, instead of doing a description, we could just put the account and the class that it is associated with. I'll try and work in there and see if there's just some more information we can get to for the next go through a check register.
And like Mayor Talbot said, I don't know that it requires lots of changes. He's more talking about big ticket or unusual items.
Right, just something that you understand it, and you say, well, I want the board to understand that this is what we're doing.
Yep, more than happy
Instead
to.
of just blazing over.
May not have to be on the sheet.
No,
Verbally discussed.
could be verbally as well.
Okay, yep.
I appreciate the attitude of Nick and staff and just trying to help us be transparent. And I think it's really important. It's good to be able to have the information ahead of time. And if there are questions, we can ask them, and we should.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. Ready?
Please.
To approve the April and May check registers.
I'll second.
A motion by Jewel and a second by Mayor Bierman. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Ask one question.
Please, yes.
So I just noted in the budget, we've got reserves that are being used as revenue in last year and this year. It's great to see it decline. We don't have a balance sheet item there, do we? What is the actual status or the level of the reserves that we have?
I would have to double check it right now, but we are looking at about 1.2 million.
And how is that compared over time?
It has gone up significantly in the new era. We had typically, I think, a couple years, the year right before you took over, we had a deficit, and then we started putting more. When Carrie and Roger were running the fiscal shop, pulling the reins a little more because we weren't exactly sure. The accounting hadn't been great before, and we didn't know how much we really had. So you'll also see that our interest, because we have most of our reserves, or all of our reserves in the Public Treasurer's Fund, the PTIF, your interest income has gone up significantly because we're actually letting it sit in there instead of just having it in our checking account.
We have a target level that we're shooting at?
No,
We-
so actually, let me jump in on that one, because over the last 3 years, as the finances have stabilized within the organization, we had a 2-year period of time where we tightened the belt. One, it was really under Roger's leadership, and saved over $500,000 in back-to-back budgets that then went into the reserves, which there's actually over, now I think, about 3 years worth of fiscal years that helped pay for the remodel. And then you had the one-time infusion of money that came from the co-op, the dissolution of the co-op. We are a public entity, which means that there are fund balance laws that apply to us as they apply to a city or a special service district. So we do have more in the reserves now than a city should, but because we're an interlocal entity, we have a little more wiggle room than the city should. So a city should only be a quarter of your operating budget. With an interlocal entity, you have a little bit more wiggle room. So one thing that board tasked us to do in April, and we wanted to wait until we finalize the budget for this coming fiscal year, is to have you consider and adopt a fund balance policy of how much should be in the reserves going forward. The historic numbers is we didn't really have reserves. It's only been in the last few years. 500,000 you saw is almost entirely dedicated to the remodel. The 80,000 you see there is for the website. So they're for one-time capital projects. And then in August, our plan is to come back with a fund balance policy that then this board and subsequent boards can adjust those reserves accordingly as we set future budgets.
Thank you. Yep. Good question. And it's nice to be able to have these discussions. Thank you, Roger. And
Yeah, let's make this comment. How we tightened the belt, we left a lot of positions open. Places that are mine and several others, so saved on salary. We did have some other control we put in place.
on speakers, seems like we went a little lighter on.
About half this cost of this building was generated in internal savings. But that was not sustainable. So Cam's taking it to the floor.
Well, I fully appreciate, I don't think I fully appreciate, I just really appreciate what has been done. It's nice to have positive results.
And it is.
And you'll see in 11 for future business, you'll see the fund balance policy there, because we wanted to make sure that you knew that we realized we're on notice to bring that back to you. We just wasn't ready for today's discussion. Perfect.
Nice. Nice to have that discussion right now. All right, let's see. So we're good with the check registers. Let's go to the 2019 annual convention schedule, timing.
Perfect. And this will be brief, but this will set up the legislative conversation we're about to have, which is the outreach between now and September, and how we want to use the September conference, not just for training, but also for organizing around our key principles. So the first piece is just the calendar side of things, and Nick, will you switch over to the PowerPoint just so people can visualize this? Move this closer so hopefully people can hear me better. So, yeah, next slide. Oh, I made this last night and forgot to put today's date. Okay, so obviously we're here today. Next board meeting scheduled is on August 12th, and then on 7th. What? I am. I'm gonna put that back. Then
Someone on the other end.
Yeah, probably is on the other end. Let me just turn this here.
okay, I'll keep going. Yeah, it sounds like the echo's going. Okay, so Monday, August 12th is the next board meeting, and then we're at annual, just like that. So the board,
We lost a few months somewhere. What's going on?
summer vacation. We normally don't meet in July, so we've got that August meeting. So that'll be the last meeting before annual. So when we get to Dave Church's discussion later about the 2020 principles, it is have the first discussion today, come back to finalize it in August. We have a board meeting scheduled for Tuesday, September 10th, and LPC both scheduled Tuesday, September 10th. We're suggesting that if you're up to it, we could move one of those to the Monday. So Resolutions Committee is the LPC. So we do that Monday at lunch. It is a Zoom call, so we normally do LPCs on Monday. People who would be traveling up for the convention, you need not come up on Monday for the whole week. You could still just come up for the board meeting on the Tuesday and then for the rest of the week. What would be nice about that is separating the board meeting with LPC gives us more time to prepare for everything and spreads it out a little bit. We can come back to that in a second, though. The new board will start in October, and then you can see the different summer deadlines about the Taylor Service Award, nominations to the board, and you saw in your packet the different vacancies. So you can see whose terms expire this September. And even if your term is expired, you can run again. We will have vacancies in the Region 1, which is Northern Utah. Damon represents that area currently. And then the other vacancy is in Region 6, which is the Uinta Basin area, and Dustin White represents that area.
That's 5, actually.
Oh, 5, yeah, sorry. And then you can see the policy resolutions, which again, we're trying to use the annual convention as an organizing tool. So those resolutions are due at the end of August. So we can have them prepared for the board's consideration or the LPC's consideration in September, and then you're into the conference during the week of September 9th. So with that as the background, we can either set a new schedule today for September 9th, September 10th, if you want to talk about it, or again, you can just defer to the officers to work with staff about what makes sense, knowing the board meeting LPC would be either both on the same day or we flip them September 9th and September 10th. The main highlights, Nick, go on the next slide. See the main highlights for the conference. You've got the cards around the table. We have Andy Card, who was President Bush's chief of staff when the towers fell on 9/11. He will be speaking on September 11th. So we're very excited about that presentation. We will have tribute to retiring elected officials, including several who are on our board, essay contest winners and the like. And then we're going to do a soft launch for the university concept. We had a conference call yesterday with several board members as we were talking through how to enhance the overall training. And so we hope to do a pre-conference session. We're looking into starting a credentialing system for the conference that could start in September, and then laying the groundwork for some additional plans for the calendar year 2020. And so wanted to make you aware that we're hoping to implement that as part of the annual convention as well. Applications, if you're interested in offering workshops or mobile tours or other things, it closes on June 28th. We already have over 100 applications for that 3-day conference. Yeah, wow is right. And so that's in part why we're looking at webinars and podcasts and other ways to get some of this valuable information out to our members, rather than just relying on getting together twice a year. We've been in communication with groups that can do these deep dive opportunities for us, 4 to 6 hour trainings that could be part of the conference as well. So wanted to just make you aware of those efforts and the timing of everything that's happening this summer. And in fact, I'll stop there, Mayor, and see if there's any questions about the timing of meetings and deadlines and the highlights of annual.
Questions, comments, any discussion you want to have? I mean, some of this is, like you say, whether if you have any big, strong opinions on the days in September, LPC, board meeting, which days, I don't mind, actually. I consider that thing, whatever works best for staff. I think it is, we try to compact things quite a bit as it is. And so I'm fine with expanding that and essentially doing LPC Mondays, and that was your kind of.
Yeah, that's one option, is you do LPC on Monday and then the board meeting still on Tuesday. And you could do both of them during the lunch hours to make it a little more convenient for people. Because right now we do LPC and it's on the Tuesday, which is a big city council day. And we could do the board meeting earlier on the Tuesday so people can get to city council. So I think we've got a little flexibility. And the last thing I'll say is, since we're moving to the Salt Palace next year, we see this year is a good chance to test run a few changes within the conference format and see if people appreciate them. And then when we move to the Salt Palace, we try things before we get over there.
Any thoughts, any concerns for those of you that might be needing to travel greater distances? That LPC would be, you could conference in for, as Karen said. The board meeting would be, of course, you can always conference in, but that would be an in-person one.
Yeah.
But you could conference in if you had to, but then, hopefully you're able to come to the conference. Most of us, so.
I just have one thought, but it might only just apply to me, but if we move the one to Monday and so we have Monday and Tuesday, I don't have to travel for, I'm not going to be up here for the whole weekend, but it is going to take me almost an hour to get here. And if we also move that to Monday, that just means I have no days that week that I can do the work that I need to do at the city, because it's just kind of chopped up and mostly with drive time. And so if we kept all of that on a long running Tuesday, it's Monday to get some other things done. But
that's a
I
part where I wanted to
agree
ask.
with Mayor Pike. If whatever works best for you guys, you guys are running around like chickens with your head cut off, working around the clock, getting ready for that. And I know it would be more difficult than possible. So if it's easier for you on the day, really.
I'm really the same way, whatever works best. Maybe we have a little more discussion with the executive committee, if they're not strong feelings either way on the rest of the board, we'll just do that and let you know. And then can we, while we're here, talk about August 12th?
Yeah, so the August 12th board meeting, the time is still TBD. We have the opportunity to take the officers up to meet with the Lieutenant Governor. Governor's unavailable that week, but the Lieutenant Governor is available, and we've done this with the officers in the past. And so, he's available at 3:30, and so rather than having a board meeting at 9 and having the officers basically hang out in Salt Lake, if we moved the board meeting to lunch like we're doing today, then the officers could go up to the Capitol, meet with the Lieutenant Governor, and then save you some time.
Well, is that okay if we kind of do it?
Much appreciated.
Yeah. Agreed, and
Yeah.
Although
that way.
the Senate cafeteria, you get a lot done.
Yeah. My plane flies a little bit lower and slower, so I appreciate the extra time to get up here.
Exactly.
While our airport's close. So yeah, that would mean I could leave in the morning and be here in time to.
Okay. All right, so we'll finalize with the officers the exact times then of the August and September timeframes. Then last thing is, if you want to run for second vice president, that's a 4-year term that will be open. Mayor Caldwell will be chairing the resolutions committee as the second vice president. If you are interested in running for either a board of directors spot or a second vice president, you need to submit this form. And then if you're other people in your cities or in your areas that you think would be good to serve, please submit that. And then the resolutions piece, this is how we build the policy platform. And so as we have the conversation in the rest of the board meeting today, think through what this means for the policy platform and submitting resolutions. And then we'll share this information broadly with the membership to try to get feedback, because that really is what gives us our marching orders when we go to the Capitol. And let me give you one specific example of how this resolution process can work. Last year, those of you who are on the board remember we had a pretty heated board meeting about marijuana. And it was the Tuesday morning of annual. Okay, so Tuesday morning it was a terrible planning on my part. I planned 20 minutes, was over an hour on marijuana, which then made us late to LPC. We came running into LPC. Here's this resolution from the board. And then we had a pretty heated discussion on the floor during our business session that Friday. All in all, we got to a good place on our medical marijuana resolution. That was Friday. Monday morning, I got a call from the speaker's office and the governor's office because I'd forwarded them the resolution saying, when can you come meet to talk about this resolution? So that week, I was meeting with all of them because they were preparing for a potential special session. When I walked into Speaker Hughes's office, he and his chief of staff had our resolution highlighted, question marks, exclamation points, and we went line by line through that resolution. And they said, if we go this far, can you live with it? If we go here, can you live with it? Point is, the resolution process, if we use it well, can be a very valuable resource for us in our advocacy. And so that's what we're trying to, over the next few months, make sure our membership realizes that value.
Well said.
I just jumping on the nominations process very quickly. Just want to let everyone know I kind of staff that this year in Abby's more extended role, as Cam was mentioning. She's going to be helping me with that, but I will be reaching out to board members who will not be running for re-election to possibly sit on that nominations committee. We like to have people who know what the job is deciding that. So
Happy to help.
Yep, great. Yep, I will be sending out, as you saw, some emails go through soliciting actual nominations. I'll be sending out an email as well, trying to get people to sit on that committee. So we appreciate any help there.
Well, with that, Mayor, can we, are any other questions about annual? Okay.
So be here before you know it.
That's sad but true. Nick, you want to slide over? Okay, let's talk about the tax task force over the next hour or so. Our goal is to walk away from here with making sure we're all on the same page about the rules of engagement with the tax task force, and then also talk through that 2020 election cycle and potential platform for league policy. We have a few other legislative items to update you on, so it's going to be a fast and furious hour here on legislative things. I'm going to turn it over to Roger and Wayne to talk through the tax policy piece. Roger, you've got the task force list up there, and then the next slide are the dates of the meetings.
I'm going to try and stand for a little bit here.
If you're online, if you can't hear Roger, make sure you let us
me know. I'm going to back up to this before the session last year. Some general comments about tax reform, tax, whatever you want to changes. Some things, at least in my experience, sort of have to pre-exist before you can have major tax reform. What did or didn't happen is sort of where we are now. In my experience, to do major tax overhaul changes requires first some articulation of immediacy. In other words, we've got a crisis, we have to deal with something. Saying it's just good tax policy generally isn't enough. You usually got to say that there's more than just that to the issue. The second issue is that legislators tend to not outsource their vote on tax reform. By that, simply because leaderships ask for their vote doesn't mean they'll get it on tax changes. This is one where every legislator's got to defend their vote to their individual constituents. And I'm not trying to say that leadership's not important, but my experience on this issue, there's only so far you can go to push those particular issues. And the third is, generally speaking, it usually requires the governor to basically drive the thing home to get it done. Well, and my comment is just the assessment of last session is that they had a rather ambiguous articulation of what the immediacy was. There was this sense of we've got to deal with the siloing effect of the income tax and the general fund, but then they moved immediately to the big change on tax and services. Over time, the debate over what is the immediacy became really questioned. And I think one of the reasons why the process sort of foundered is there was disagreement, well, why does this have to be done this session now? When we hadn't even seen the bill until a couple of weeks before the end of the session. So I think you had that challenge of immediacy. The second issue is as far as outsourcing the votes. There was an awful lot of pressure that came in one house. My comment is not too critical as much as to articulate what happened. But part of that was driven by the fact there was no bill. You could sort of drive the immediacy and drive the abstract, but you didn't have a bill that was sitting there until 2 weeks before we got to the end. What you had happening is you also had a unique dynamic with legislators. You had a lot of legislators in the House, and you had new leadership everywhere else. I would say about halfway through the session, a lot of the House members started saying, we don't particularly want to walk the plank on this.
You have a third, was it a third?
The third, well, yeah.
It was new.
That was brand new. One of the houses never bought this.
Right.
Ever. The third issue is even though the governor made this a centerpiece of the state, and he pushed the issue, I would argue it wasn't necessarily strong arming votes to get it done on this particular issue. The result is we got to the end of the session and they pulled the plug. Then where were we? Well, I think when we left the session, the expectation was some courts, well, we'll just sort of take 441, which was the bill number, massage it and run that. That quickly became apparent that wasn't going to happen. So the task force was put together and is in some ways, I think, different in terms of its mission than what it started out with Representative Schultz's bill in session came out. I don't agree with that, but I think Representative Schultz, who drove this resolution, viewed very much we were going to keep 441 and sort of make change. I would say in the one meeting that's been held in our discussion, they're not going back to 440. There may be some version of services that gets included, but that massive of change including services, I think, has not been formally before. We're not doing that, but I haven't heard anybody saying we're going to do that.
Well,
in every regard.
I was going to ask you, Roger, and any of you, how many times have you heard from legislators in the last little while, 441 is gone?
Yeah, and I think that is the general view.
Now, I'm not sure if it really is, but if it's a shell game, I don't know. But they're saying, Brad Last was telling me, it's gone.
I think that's generally true as that as being the solution.
Yeah.
Now, the task force is dealing with the same basic question of what is the immediate problem? And frankly, I hear different articulations of that. The siloing issue is still the driver on this issue. In other words, income tax goes to education, is growing faster than the other fund. So that's the driver of this issue. The question is, does this have to be done in a special session? Can we wait till January? Does it even have to be done then? And I think you're seeing some movement on the immediacy of this having to be done with. I would argue that the more immediacy is they're tired of wanting it off the table, more than it is they have to do something this year. Now, having said that, I think there was a sincere effort, but I wanted you to say that that's sort of a, we have to do this or we can't balance our budget message, which started off last session, I think is not there in this regard. I think there is a message of, well, we do have to deal with this eventually, and we've got the group, but let's see what we come up with. The other issue is, I think there was an acknowledgement that the process was not as broad as it should have been. I don't think you're going to see this task force try and ram something. I think it's going to be much more information gathering and discussion, because I think every legislator views, I got to cast a vote on this, and I'm not outsourcing that vote, which is a slightly different variable. I think it tends to dismiss the idea that you're going to have a secret bill together in the middle of 9 grand. I think it's going to be much more of a widespread discussion on that issue. And the third remains, I would still say, going into an election year, and I said that with the governor as well, how involved do they want to be in terms of driving an outcome? And I honestly don't know. I would say you'd take a little bit of backing up from that issue. What has changed a little bit is I don't think the legislature wants to have this process end and not do something. I think they feel like they're out there and need to come up with something. Now, part of the way you can deal with that is you simply, term I've always used is you simply redefine victory. We come up with maybe something less grandiose, we come up with something that is something that we call that. we solve the problem. That might be the direction. The other issue is.
President, can I just clarify, did you say the governor's office hasn't kind of given me a sense of direction on this?
Well,
Whether there's a hammer on this or-
I haven't felt that at all. I think that in some ways they turned this over to the legislature.
Yeah, I think that's the way to put it. We've gotten mixed messages from people in the governor's office. There's some who feel like their moment has come and gone. And then you have others who feel like we still need to swing for the fences, similar to what they tried to do with 441. And because of the 2020 gubernatorial cycle, there's a different political dynamic now than there was 4 months ago.
It's very different.
Spencer Cox has got to be hated, right? I mean, I've already heard him make a few comments like, well, I don't think it's going to happen. Or if it does, it's going to be much smaller than what it was. But, you know, how would you like to be campaigning for governor when the governor's office, and you're kind of bound to support your boss, is in support of major tax reform?
Because Kristen Cox was on that.
Yeah,
list.
she's one of the
We went in
non-voting
that
members.
meeting and
Yep.
She was all.
And
This has been Kristen
And still being,
This has been Kristen and Phil.
that's their baby.
And Kristen's a very capable woman. I'm not trying to, but it was very much their personal.
Yeah, no, I felt that one.
Yeah.
I'm saying the governor's office isn't sending a push or giving you a sense of direction. That's a big difference from where I felt when we had those last meetings.
That's
And I think it's in part because in both branches, everyone is saying this is a clean slate. Roger and I met with Senator Hilliard up in Logan a couple of weeks ago, and he said, if there's one thing you can take back to your membership, it's that we do not have a predetermined outcome in mind. This is a true listening tour. So I'm speaking on behalf of the Senate. I don't want to speak on behalf of the House, but it's a true listening tour. But I feel like based on the feedback we've gotten, everybody is taking that approach right now. And we've had several legislators who told us that they have a list of 38 potential options that they could look at. And that's not potential services to tax. It's different tax policy levers they can pull, only some of which impact cities, some of which are independent of cities.
That sort of leads to this point. The problem they are still addressing is a state revenue issue. Frankly, if they did not have the earmarking issue, then we would not be having this discussion. That's the immediacy issue that's there. How immediate, we can debate, but that's the driver, because the base issue is no different in Utah than it is in 45 others. That's the variable that's there. It is, so how do we deal with that state revenue issue? And the solutions that could be looked at could have any impact on us. That's the direction of this issue. In other words, this is not about, the study is not about us, but its impact could impact us, which means we're impacted, but we're not leading. The second issue is the policy issues really don't affect us at all in terms of, is it better to do an income tax this or sales tax this or whatever. We've stayed out of that debate over what should be taxed. What we've said consistently is, if you do this, make sure you're aware that that option could potentially impact us, and being aware of articulating that message. We did a very good job during the last session of keeping that focus with 440. We never got sucked into the debate over we should tax this and not tax that. We stayed completely out of that. We stayed completely on message of if you're lowering rates to compensate for the base expansion, be aware this happens. And I think that was heard. In fact, the truth of the matter is that was probably the first issue they finally threw their hands up, said we don't have a fix. Mm-hmm. And that started the cascading on the other stuff. If they do sales tax base expansion of any size, that same variable will be back. Now, a couple of things. I don't think they're going to go as big on base expansion. That's on the table, which is a two-edged sword for us. Frankly, that raises the question of it's not that big of a base expansion. Is there that big of a driver to lower the rate? Or conversely, let's say, hey, you're making money. It's not that much. We're not going to be that worried about you. And so it's in some ways a dicier issue because frankly, they've gone big with 441 where it was, and if they actually pulled it off, there would have been a lot of money. I don't think they're gonna be at that magnitude, so, which means following the dynamics of the base changes, if they insist on revenue neutrality, we're gonna have that same issue with maybe a harder argument, but it's the same monitoring what happens when it's impacted. If they put sales tax back on food, that has no impact on our base 1%. It does on the various other rates, and maybe they just take a 10th out like they did the first time. But my point is, it's covering a whole series of other options out there. I can't tell you which ones are. I can tell you my preference, but I can tell you that which ones are going to. I think it's more likely to have a combination of some change with eliminating exemptions. I think the base is going to be a really, really strong argument with one house saying over our dead body and the other saying that's what we want. I actually think a sincere discussion about changing the state constitution has gone from being a no way in the world to a real possibility this time, which again doesn't directly impact us. There could be an imposition of the state property tax, which has never been done for the state to fund before, but the last time it was done was repealed in 1978. So my point is there's a lot of those different options, but remembering our role in this process is we're not driving the policy discussion, we're monitoring to make sure that whatever options they choose don't have a ripple effect on us, or if that does, we'll prepare to articulate that message. And that puts us in the interesting position. We want to be there, but we truly don't want to have our issue be the driver of the discussion. So how do we consistently keep that message?
And what Roger just said is what we want to make sure we're all on the same page about before we go forward, which is that we're involved, but we're not out trying to lead to a certain outcome. Because if the legislature decides to focus on the income tax, for example, that doesn't affect us. If they go to sales tax, there's a ripple effect on us. And so at what point do we wait and see and then react according to what proposal gets momentum, versus at what point do we come out and say, this is the proposal we should do, and we make ourselves a target, but also maybe create a big benefit for local government. Up to this point, through the session and since the session, we have taken the approach of involved but not in front. There are going to be 8 task force meetings starting next week. And so we want to make sure we're on the same page of being involved but not in front, unless the board feels like, no, we need to be more aggressively in front. And then if so, let's make sure we're on the same page.
Now, involved doesn't mean you don't say it.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. In fact, Raj, you have to turn over to Wayne to talk about that.
So one last thing for commission. President Adams, several in the Senate I talked to last month in social settings, and they honestly don't know where they're headed or what we're going to do. But the one caution was, tell your city, don't get greedy. That was their only comment. They said, there's a lot of moving currents in this process. Just make sure you don't.
That's kind of ironic.
I listened. No, my comment. I said, "Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean?" He said, "We don't want to hurt.
We're not the ones proposing to increase.
We don't want to hurt you. We've got to solve. We have to solve a problem. Just help us on it." That's how this framed.
Yeah, agreed. So behind Roger, you'll see the list of the 8 task force meetings. We got this information Friday afternoon. I called many of you one-on-one. I didn't have a chance to call everybody, but I called many. It was officially announced this morning. This is now public information of these 8 meetings. You'll notice the 3-hour blocks. The first hour is going to be an informal open house. They're still figuring out what that actually means, but it'll be an informal open house to the public. The latter 2 hours are going to be, for lack of a better term, open mic night. So they're going to allow for public comment for 2 hours without a proactive agenda item. In other words,
They're not
they're not going to say, we want to expand sales tax to services. What do you think? It's just going to say, general public, what do you think about tax reform? You have 3 minutes each, 2 hours, off we go.
And it's not structured, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
3 minutes apiece?
3 minutes per speaker. Yeah. Well, that's what they told me. Now,
So I can't go to Dixie and protest the fact that we don't have a hearing in Weaver County.
I think you should.
Stop that for 2 hours.
if I was the bearer of bad news, the mayor called me on Friday night. So happy Father's Day weekend in advance.
He was very surprised.
Yeah. So these are the 8. Now, what you don't see up here, because it's not yet finalized, but I've been texting with legislative leadership during this meeting, is the task force members are willing to meet with local officials prior to the official 3-hour meeting. And so we've been trying to figure out the exact details of that. So for example, in Washington County, the meeting's from 1 to 4 on Saturday, June 29th. So they'd be willing to meet from noon to 12:45 with city leaders and local leaders, likewise with those other meetings. That still leads to the question, yes, we'll have more information about that piece as I get it finalized. But it does still lead the question of what is our public face here. And so Wayne, you want to talk about what we've prepared and what we're proposing to you as a board for the public face?
Gary, did you have a comment first or question? Okay. So like Roger and Cam said, during the legislative session, we were successful in talking about what we're calling the ripple effect. If you do this is the ripple effect for local municipalities. And it can be good, it can be negative, it can be both across the state depending on what they decide to do and how they decide to implement it. But one of the issues that popped up is that not every legislator totally understands how a municipality works and how they are funded. And so when we try and talk about a ripple effect, if they don't understand how the 1% works and how the 50-50 formula works, we're having to go back to square one. And so that's what this first document is here, is we're producing just a kind of making sense of dollars 101, much simpler, much more concise, talking about how municipalities are funded. So that way, if they decide to do a property tax, a statewide property tax, we can talk about the ripple effect because we're a player in property tax.
So Wayne?
Yeah.
Just clarification. I don't think a number of people in leadership understand how cities are funded. That was apparent in some of our meetings where they didn't understand. They didn't understand even the 50-50, 1% split. They really don't know. And I guess I get it. We all focus on what we're supposed to, but I think it's, so to assume that the average legislator understands it, not a surprise that they don't. And so it's critical, I think, that we do this.
Yeah, so the document hopefully is designed to be for legislators and the general public. So when we're talking about how we fund ourselves and a ripple effect, that will make sense both to elected officials as well as the general public. This is a draft, so we hope to have it look a little nicer and fancier. But again, we just want to talk about how we're funded, and then at these public meetings, elected officials and members of the board can talk about a ripple effect. Because
Nick, will you switch to the script?
After all of these 8 meetings, the tax task force will come back in August and hold a series of meetings to discuss the issues that float to the top. And so we just want to be able to make sure that they're aware of, oh, hey, if we pick up expanding the base and lowering the rates, they already know that there will be ripple effects within local municipalities, and that needs to be, we need to be part of the conversation. So we thought in each meeting, a member of the board would kind of have the same script up top.
Go back up to the top.
It would introduce like, hey, we're players in this, we want to participate, and then we want to talk about a ripple effect. And then each board member would pick a specific ripple effect that would have impact in their area. So resort community tax, Nick, can you go to the bottom? Sorry. How we have 248 different bases changing the 50-50 formula. Again, there's a broad topic or broad issues that you can discuss, but these are just some brainstorms we have right here.
So the concept then for you to consider is that at each of these 8 meetings, during the public hearing, a lead board member, not staff, would testify, and you'd follow this script. The introduction and the general ripple effect would be the same in each of the 8 meetings, but then there'd be a specific ripple effect that would be brought up in each of the 8 meetings. That way, it's not the same testimony each time, but the general concept is the same throughout.
You still wait for that.
Yeah, the objective is to inform and to announce the ripple effect, but not get to advocating a solution yet. And we save the advocacy piece until August, when we see what starts to come out of these task force meetings, and we see, generally speaking, where the legislature may go and how that could impact us.
So you're pretty sure that the speaker, for example, or someone, because he's not on the task force, but isn't gonna pause and ask one of us, what's your solution? Because that's what I got asked. Do you remember?
Yep.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And we had, our answer wasn't satisfactory to them. So anyway, I just trust they won't ask us that.
No, and also, that particular issue, bear in mind, was over the 50/50.
Right.
Which frankly is not part of this discussion. One of our big guardians is not becoming that either. But the focus now is much more, you know, how you choose to solve your problem is up to you. Understand though, these are the things you've got to consider. So there's a difference between those two issues.
Can I ask one other question? And I don't know how many of you have had this happen yet, but I think it's certainly possible that each one of us could be asked by our local businesses. Cameron and I have talked about this. What are you doing, Mayor, to stop the legislature from increasing our taxes or taxing services in situations where they're not? I just am saying that because I think we're going to be faced with that as well. Is here we are, you're used to this, right? We wear a couple of hats. We're representing cities, but we're also representing citizens and businesses. And so I just think
some of you are standing for re-election
some
this
of us,
year.
yeah, some are. I'm
This
not,
summer, 2 weeks
yeah.
after the task force is begun.
Yeah. So good luck with that. Anyway, I just am saying I think it's going to be tricky. And even when some of us are asked to speak at these in our 3 minutes of fame, it could be interesting if right alongside us there's a local CPA or something, a local attorney saying, don't do this, state, don't, here's why not. And then you're saying, well, and again, that's why we're not going to get specific. But I think we just have to acknowledge we're also going to be fielding those questions on our own back in our cities, and we'll have to be cautious.
One last thing I'll bring up as part of the outreach plan is that we propose that after this board meeting this afternoon, that we send out email alerts to the membership coming from board members. So email by region saying, here's the task force schedule, it's out, and inviting our members to participate in a conference call on Friday with league staff to basically have this conversation, independent of trying to have that conversation, say, at the task force. Basically, the pre-meeting, we'd like to use UCMA's listserv to get the information there, as well as the municipal clerks. The task force gets underway next Tuesday, and we'll go for a month with 8 meetings over the course of that month. But the hope is we get information out to our folks via email saying, here's our strategy, here's our plan of engagement. We do a conference call where we talk through everything, and then board members with a league staffer at each event will help coordinate on the ground there, and maybe we have that pre-meeting on the ground there with local elected officials and legislators. That way our membership feels like we're doing something and sees our action, even though at this point in time we're not crossing the advocacy line yet. Your thoughts?
Jump in.
I have a comment. I think all of us have attended public hearings or have received emails from constituents that were verbatim, word for word, And we know that they get discounted pretty quickly when it's just I'm just regurgitating the message that I've been told to regurgitate. So I really like this approach of that we're underlining the core principle of talking about the ripple effect, but then each message is unique so that we don't get accused of just being martinets. I really like it.
Yeah, I will say that Representative Gibson said in the first meeting, I don't want to hear the same thing every time. So he sent a warning out there that if there are organizations or groups that show up and say the same thing in each meeting, he won't appreciate it. So that's why, we think that if our overall, ripple effect message is the same, but then it's specific to an area or region, hopefully they listen.
Yeah, except for Weber County, because Weber County doesn't.
I'm still planning to come filibuster your meeting.
Got an extra room for you. I hate to be this cynical, but I guess I am in this regard. I actually think they know they're not likely. I think they realize, however, they just got absolutely pilloried the process.
So they had to do this.
441. I think this is much more an effort to say, we reached out and we have to hear some things that we didn't know, great. But that's what's driving us.
I agree. I think it's all optics.
Yeah.
We can make recommendations on what could be talked about at each meeting. Are there any thoughts, preferences? You can send us an email after the meeting if there's something specific you would like to talk about at the meeting in your region.
Cameron, do you have thoughts in terms of who on the board might be, that you might ask to speak at each of these meetings?
We had
Mayor Caldwell's going to speak in St. George.
Filibuster.
I was hoping for the St. George.
Yeah.
Well, you guys remember when it is, right?
Yeah, the Saturday before
Saturday,
July.
June 20th. Well, it's not as hot this year, normal, but you can't fly down.
Yeah. Nick, if you go back to the PowerPoint, there are some that are naturals. For example, Dr. Barnett was unable to join the board meeting today, but I had a call with him yesterday. And so June 28th in Richfield, he's already committed to do that one. So there are some that are natural fits. There are others, like the Salt Lake County one that's taking place in Kearns. We have 6 board members from that region. And so to me, it's a matter of internally deciding who the best spokesperson is. Or Mayor Ramsey and I were talking about this on Friday. It may make sense in Salt Lake County to have a couple of voices because the regional issues on the west side of the valley and east side of the valley are different. For Davis County, Mayor Talbot represents the cities of Davis County, because our region is Davis and Weber counties, but it probably may make sense to have both Mayor Talbot and Mayor Caldwell, because of Weber County also. The key is we don't want to be redundant and we don't want to become a target in these meetings, but we can organize internally to make sure we've got the right person. We don't need all 21 board members to speak. 1 board member at each spot, and then maybe in the urban areas, 2 board members could make sense. So we don't need to necessarily finalize that with a motion, but I think it's more everyone being willing to trust each other to whoever's speaking based on that outline we've presented.
The one thing I do like about the outline is that we all have a sense of things we can say and should say to stay unified.
We do.
That's what we need to do.
Yep.
Because as much as I think it's great that we can voice our own opinions, I think it's important that the talking points in general keep us on the same point, wherever we are, so that we don't say something different in St. George, we don't say something different in the Kearns location than we do Kaysville, because then we're saying, well, wait, how unified are you guys?
Right.
So I don't mind, I don't mind the fact that you can give some bullet points and say, if you're going to talk about this, this is good. You don't have to use them all, and you can ad-lib to some of that stuff. I just don't want to swim off the reservation.
Yep.
So who is our audience? Is it just the task force members or is it the media too?
Good question.
There are multiple answers to that. So yes and yes. We anticipate that area legislators are going to cover these as well. And this gets back to the inform and ripple effect objective. There will be legislators listening to this discussion who are not on the task force, who we want to also walk away understanding that there's a ripple effect piece. We have had multiple conversations with reporters about the ripple effect concept. In fact, I had one this morning with a reporter who, when I explained to him what 441 would have meant to a resort community, he said, "Oh, I never even thought of that." And so we've been trying to have those discussions behind the scenes so that when this gets a little more momentum, we've already planted those seeds about the ripple effect. With the caveat, as Roger pointed out, that tax reform could end up being a really good thing for local government long term. So we don't want to inadvertently close any doors. We want to keep all the doors open while also pointing out the potential consequences and impacts. So the message, and as we've done the script, the message is we're trying to keep it simple so a reporter can understand it. We have it so legislators can understand it, and frankly, so our own membership can understand what we're doing.
We are caught up a little bit of a dilemma there. 441 is still in the minds of everybody yet. I don't think that's the bill. So, but nonetheless, that's still the driver of the
Is there any concern to Mayor Talbot's question in terms of other local officials that might independently get up and use their 3 minutes and might not? I know the answer to this, but might not be speaking from our talking points.
Sure, and everyone has their First Amendment free speech rights.
Right.
So what we hope to accomplish between the emails and the conference call beforehand, and even trying to arrange these meetings beforehand, is to help our membership know that there is a strategy that we're following, that the board is taking the lead on the communication with the legislature, and that they don't need to get up in the public test comment and say something. They still might, but hopefully we can mitigate that to some degree.
One of mine
I'm
gets
not
up.
saying
I'm going to say, if one of mine gets up, I'm not promising anything.
Yeah, we represent 1,380 mayors and councilors. Okay, so people are comfortable with this. Our next steps will be to get an email out either this afternoon or tomorrow morning to each of the regions, work with UCMA and municipal clerks, get out and set up a call for Friday. And we'll finalize the scripts and reach out to people within each region to solicit who wants to speak. Now, again, like in Salt Lake County, it could be 6 people, so we'll narrow that down to 1 or 2.
So how well attended is this?
Interestingly, one of the requests from legislative leadership to us to help organize these behind the scenes was to make sure that the police departments were on notice, because they're very concerned about protests and they're very concerned about angry residents showing up with pitchforks. How many people will actually show up on a summer evening to talk tax policy?
Clearly, they've never been to any of our budget.
No, but they're scarred for in the conversation.
That's right. Exactly right.
And
Exactly.
if anyone said they have a truth in taxation hearing, that brings people up like nothing else. And so I think the topic of taxation itself, there's so much confusion and so much fear associated with this. I would think on a normal summer evening, people are not going to care, but I think there are going to be more, some people who do come are going to care.
Yes.
Well, the fact that it's an election year could bring some additional voices out, just to take a pot shot.
The groups that will organize, like the Chambers of Commerce, Professional Association, and there are at least 3 sort of spontaneous groups that have been organized. I've been surprised, with the whole nation too, that have been piano teachers, everything else. I don't think it's going to be enormously large, but on the other hand, it's been more grassroots than I thought.
Well, it hits the grassroots with the tax on service.
Yes. And that's still the driver.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on that topic? We good?
No, it seems like people are comfortable with the approach. So watch for more information from us over the next couple days. We get organized, and we'll have that email ready so that it can come from you through our email system to the cities and city leaders that you represent in your regions by giving them the update. Okay. All right.
Cameron, do you just want to go through the list, or do you
So
want to
let's
go
do
through
this.
the big
Let's go.
one?
Yeah, let's do.
last
Dave,
one.
I'm going to go down to you on the principals and election cycle, and then we'll come back to do the updates on the other three. Rachel does have a couple of key issues within the land use task force we need to bring up. The reason for this next conversation overlaps with the tax task force. One thing Roger said all the time during the session was a key principle in tax policy is that the state has authorized cities to impose taxes, but you actually have imposed the tax. And in some cases, your voters have approved those taxes, which means it's local money. It is not state money that is shared with you, it's local money. And this is within kind of the concept of local authority to govern and local authority over revenues. So Nick, yeah, you're back. Just go to the next slide.
Do you think they get better by that, though?
No, and I think part of the reason they don't is I don't know how many of our own members understand it either.
Right.
And that's in part why I asked Dave to take a few minutes today to talk about what our underlying legal authority really is, and then figure out what our proactive approach should be to bring up that issue of our legal authority. I've heard throughout my career, league needs more proactive and less reactive. And we've tried, particularly over the last couple of years, to be more proactive in how we protect your authority. Because at the end of the day, our top priority of the Capitol is preserve what you already have. Preserve the authority and preserve the revenue you have. There are ways we could be even more proactive, and 2020 is a unique year to have this conversation because it's a gubernatorial election, because of the tax task force, and because of some other political situations. So Nick, go to the next one. I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Dave to take a few minutes to just make sure we're all on the same page. Someone could have played the drinking game with that term I've used today, but make sure we're all starting from the same point here on what your underlying local authority is as an elected mayor council member in Utah.
All right, I'll try to be really quick because I can see that most of you reached the end of your attention span.
I was looking over there. However, you might need reflection.
Again, ask me to just review your knowledge of the basics of our legal power. We often hear to talk about home rule, local control, those kind of things, but it's important that we understand where we are in the state of Utah and how it fits, because as Cam indicated, many members of the state legislature don't understand this, and a lot of our local officials don't understand it, and certainly the residents that we serve don't really understand our power.
Yeah.
Let me just start by saying first it's local government is in the state of Utah is really the root basis of it is the state constitution. There's two provisions in the state constitution that are principally relevant on this. Article 11, section 5 of the state constitution requires the state legislature to establish a body of laws for cities to exist. So it's required that they do that. You got to the Utah Municipal Code. Now that section of the state legislature of the Constitution also requires them to classify cities by population, but it doesn't require them to give cities any particular powers. There's a section, if you read the Article 11, section 5 part of the state legislature, it's interesting in that it reads as if cities must have a certain minimum level of power, and it also allows for cities to choose a charter. In a fairly recent case, the Provo City case, the Ivy versus Provo City case, the court clarified that those minimum levels of power that are found in Article 11, Section 5 only apply to charter cities. That in Utah, the power that you have is is delegated power from by the legislature. So the legislature must have a section of law that creates cities. They must allow people to organize the cities. Under the Constitution, the cities have the right of people to create their own charters if they want. Only Twills currently has a charter in the state of Utah. But other than that, the legislature has kind of free reign to establish your form, function, and powers of local government. Now, the other section of the state constitution that's applicable to this is what the old timers call the River Clause, and that's found in Article 6, Section 28. Now, the River Clause is a limitation on what the state legislature can do in regards to some local authority. Historically, the River Clause was created because of the power of the mining companies, the railroads, and the other big lobbyists to do their special projects in states and territories. They have more power at the state legislatures than they did at the with the local communities, and so eventually the constitutions were amended to keep state legislatures from interfering with local control. The River Clause says this: the legislature shall not delegate to any special commission, private corporation, or association any power to make, supervise, or interfere with any municipal improvement, money, property, or effects, whether held in trust or otherwise, to levy taxes, to select the capital site, or to perform any municipal functions. So in short, this Constitution says the legislature can't delegate any kind of special commission any power to perform any municipal function. So we have the requirement that the legislature allow for the creation of cities and towns, and then we have the prohibition that the legislature cannot take away municipal functions and give it to any kind of special commission. Those two kind of things have been interpreted by our courts as so that to describe what our municipal power is. More currently, that River Clause has come up on the Salt Lake City argument about the Port Authority. It clearly looks like the Port Authority is a special commission created by the legislature to perform municipal functions. And so Salt Lake is threatened that they're going to sue, or bring challenges, and that's still up in the air whether they can do that. But it's a classic example of the argument of Stu. Can the legislature directly kind of take over through some kind of special committee or commission our municipal powers? The other provisions, what we can and can't do is the general grant of power that they have to do under Article 5 is Article 11, Section 5 is a little more nuanced. Our courts have been friendlier to cities and towns than our legislature has. So, for example, over the years, originally we won the right to do impact fees through a court decision before the legislature would approve it. Then the legislature cuts back that power. It was a city who passed the impact fee, challenged in court, and the court says, yes, you can do it. The legislature, it's within your power. Then the legislature has pared that back. Salt Lake City was successful with the first franchise taxes. I think it was Salt Lake City, soon Mountain Fuel. Then the legislature, the court said, yes, you can do that. That's in proper municipal power. Then the legislature has pared that back. We have the energy sales and use tax. Salt Lake City successfully came up with the local transit room tax. Little America sued them. The court says, you're okay. Our courts have been very helpful to us on those kind of things. And then the legislature pares it back. In Utah, courts have passed this, the courts have ruled in a case through Hutchinson that our local authority is as broad under the municipal code, is broader under the municipal code than it is in other states. Our courts have said that we have the authority to act in any matter where we're not specifically told we can't by the state legislature, where we're not preempted by federal or state law, and obviously where it's constitutional. Now, they base that not on the Constitution, but on a section in the municipal code that is just the grant of power from the state legislature for general welfare. It's in 10-8-84. So our courts have been very friendly to us. So in short, where we are constitutionally and now on our authority is this, is we have the power to act for the general welfare of any of our residents in any area where the state, any area where it's constitutional, of course, where the state legislature has not specifically said we can't, where they said where they haven't limited us, and we also have the ability to push back on the state legislature where they take affirmative actions, like on the Port Authority thing under the Ripper Clause, if we think that they're taking municipal power and giving it to somebody else. Now, let me just say, the Ripper Clause is, in my opinion, a better threat than an actuality. The last Ripper Clause case brought by a city that I'm aware of was West Georgia City sued to get out of the state retirement fund.
And they lost. And they lost.
And they lost. They said that, and that's the leading Ripper Clause case in Utah. They challenged the state statute. Of course, you all know there's a state statute that says if you have a retirement system, it must be the state retirement system. And once in, you can never get out of your city. So West Jordan thought they could do a cheaper, better retirement fund outside the state system, sued and said that's unconstitutional. It's a delegation to a special commission for municipal function. The court said, West Jordan, you're wrong. You're wrong because we do not think giving retirement to your employees meets the definition of municipal function. And the court in that said how they're going to look at what a municipal function is. And they said that municipal functions are, they're going to look at the relative abilities of the state and the municipal governments to perform the function, who can do it better. They're going to look at the degree to which the performance affects the interests of those beyond the boundaries of the municipality. In other words, does it affect more than just the city residents? And lastly, the extent to which legislation under attack would intrude on the ability of the people within the municipality to control through their own elected officials, the policies that affect them uniquely. So if it's uniquely your city, then theoretically they can't take that power away from you, give it to some special commission like the Port Authority or some other authority. No one that I've seen, the city's never won one of these cases. Logan.
The early. They sued. The legislature wanted to put the regulatory authority in public service commission municipal power rates. And Logan City won that case, which is why
the statute now says that ULCT, after the West Jordan case, tried to get out of regulation by the Public Service Commission on a power line they wanted to build.
So they've also had the authority to set their own rates.
Yeah, and the court said no, that's beyond the municipal jurisdiction. So it's a difficult issue. So the difficulties that we have, the challenges that we have in our legislative lobby is in my mind. First, every time we've asserted municipal power in a reasonable way, I won't say every time, but most times in court and defended something we've done, we've been fairly successful. The response to each one of those successes has been a bill filed with the legislature to pare back that power. And so although we can win in courts, it does generate a response from the legislature. Secondly, the argument that we can do it better and that the home rule, that kind of thing, has been more effective with judges than with legislators themselves for some reason. And I've never been able to figure that out why they're friendlier to the idea. And lastly, just to end it, there is an outside limitation of what the legislature can do to us. They must allow their cities under the Constitution. And there is a level of municipal function that they can't take away from us. But what that is,
We're involved with the Salt Lake City Council, the governor's office, and the legislature on the Inland Port bill. This was the op-ed or the editorial from the Desert News editorial board the week of the Inland Port special session. And I've highlighted the key provision. The Utah League of Cities and Towns, which represents the interests of all cities in the state, supported the compromise, which is a significant indication that the authority now is more aligned with city interests. And that is an accurate statement. The special session compromise bill was a significant improvement over the original bill. What you can see now is this is language from the letter that the officers signed and we submitted to the governor, expressing our support of the special session bill. But the principles that we outlined in this July letter, as well as in the March letter, revolve around everything that Dave just highlighted. So we're on record putting these principles out there. Salt Lake City is in the process of suing the state. Mayor Biskupski announced again yesterday she plans to update the litigation and serve it on the governor and the Port Authority soon. And I fully anticipate that Salt Lake City is going to come back to the league and ask for support on the litigation, which we could only offer once it got to the Supreme Court level. But it's about the very principles that we highlighted in our letter, even when we supported the compromise bill. And it's everything that Dave just articulated. So with that being said, the timing of that litigation is going to be some point in 2020. Additionally, in 2020, you have a gubernatorial election. And Governor Herbert, over the last 15 years as governor, has prided himself on being a supporter and champion of local control. And to his credit, he is. We don't know who the next governor is going to be. It's entirely possible it could be somebody who's supportive of local control, just philosophically, or it could be somebody who thinks that local governments are obstacles to progress and we need to have more state supervision, kind of views the legislature is giving permission to cities to act as opposed to the actual framework, which is we have the ability to act until the legislature says no. So then on top of this, Mayor Kafusi, this is for you, the Provo Transportation Utility Fee has been adopted in several other cities, and Pleasant Grove was sued over the transportation utility fee. That's still at the district court level, but at some point, that litigation could go to the Supreme Court, and Pleasant Grove has already told us that they plan to come ask the league for help on that litigation, again, based on these principles. So, question is, what can and should we do to proactively share these principles with our members, with the legislature, and other stakeholders? And there's political risk to that, and Dave highlighted it. The more we bring up our authority under that Hutchinson decision, the more we draw a target to it, and you could see folks who are anti-city and try to bring a legal challenge that could undermine and flip us back to being what's known as a Dillon rule state, which is how most states operate around this country, which is where the cities need permission from the legislature before they can act. That's the status quo in most states. Locally, that's not our status quo. We as a league are a public entity. We cannot endorse candidates. You as elected officials can endorse candidates. So there is some value in putting together a platform of principles about local control and local authority that then you can use when gubernatorial or Senate or House candidates come to you and ask for your support. There's also the risk of the legislative backlash, which Dave articulated, that the more we assert that we have this underlying authority, the more it becomes a target. The legislature tries to scale it back, but they do that anyway. So is there not value in being more assertive and articulating those principles? And the annual convention is the time to do it, because it's the perfect jump off into the 2020 election cycle, and it's before the 2020 session, and it's before the task force will have finished their work. So the timing works. The question is that what we want to do? So Mayor, I'll stop talking there, and Dave, thanks for your presentation. The last thing I'll say, even though I said I was done, Nick, if you go to the last slide.
Previous.
The next slide, sorry. It'll be the last slide of the presentation, is that I've been pushing the National League of Cities to try to lead out on this question of preemption and home rule and the like, and they've partnered with the Local Solutions Support Center. And I was on the phone yesterday with the director of this effort, and they're putting together a vision statement and principles about local authority that they can share with state leagues around the country. And we're going to get a sneak peek of it and help be able to draft that for a nationwide effort about local authority. I'll have my hands on that in July. They plan to in November and January, and they were thrilled. We are more ahead of the game than any other league except for the Florida League about trying to push back on these principles. And so, that's another opportunity. They're doing polling and focus groups about how to message this, which could be very helpful for us. But still, the underlying question, Nick, if you go back to the previous slide, is, are the potential objectives worth the potential political risks, and how do we want to proceed for the annual convention?
So I think the key is the board supportive of this direction, essentially, that we're trying to go. We've been talking about this the last couple of years, actually, and this has been where we wanted to go, just a kind of a gut check, I guess. Does this sound good? Sound like what you've intended? As we've been talking about this over the last year, 2 years for some of us.
Articulating these principles in a resolution.
Do you need a motion to support that?
Direction.
Yeah, eventually, yes. But
today, just direction.
To me, the gut check's important, because the more we highlight it, the more we put ourselves at risk. Is that where we want to go over the next 11 weeks?
We put ourselves at risk, Cam, but I think we're already at risk. I mean, I look at the escalation in the state level. We had the prison, and then we had the inland port, and I don't know if anybody's watching what's going on with MIDA, Wasatch County, and
that was why the reporter called me this morning.
County impact, but it may end up being our challenge, and Heber's challenge, and others were. For those of you that don't know, they took a project that was once an A-frame for military service people and use that to expand up into Summit County and then Wasatch County, which was going to be a 40-acre hotel, and it's now been expanded to a 4,000-acre special state district that doesn't apply to local zoning or authority. And now they're actually looking at coming over into Summit County, and it's just growing and growing. And so I think each case of this, we're seeing the state get bolder with enabling these things. So I think this is bold, but I think we leave ourselves at risk if we don't take action.
That's my point entirely. If we lose more if we don't, then we risk it if we do.
I noticed that the president of the Salt Lake Chamber, Derek Miller, is going to be down in St. George this week. And he's speaking at we have a business summit going on there Thursday. And he's speaking separately about the inland port, what it can do for Washington County. What do you think that's going to be about? So you just never know. So anyway, I agree. I just want to make sure. Yeah, Brett.
So this seems like it's an issue that is existed before any of us were here, and it's just escalated. And the real solution, if I can be so bold, is to say you got to have people in the legislature that understand this. And educating them is, in some regard, I mean, it's what we can do, but it also is a little bit after the fact, right? It would be so much better if people here, and as part of their service, maybe on city councils or whatever, ultimately chose to serve there and looked at things at a state level through a lens that was more.
And that is another thing we've talked about recently, isn't it? We've got to find a way to kind of foster that, because there are people that do, and they're good listening ears for us, that they do understand and they do listen to us. Sometimes they forget some of the city things, but they have that background. I think that's something we ought to really be working on as a league. It's trying to foster those opportunities.
So I think you all should run.
Yeah.
You have the coolest socks of the day. I think you ought to be around.
After Jerry, I want to ask Roger about the 1988 and 1995 efforts.
All right.
Roger, I'm putting you and Dave on
On
notice
notice.
to talk about those.
Gary.
I just think we need to be careful about the purpose of the education and who we're educating, because this is going to educate people that the power can be pared back even more. And I think that's a really legitimate concern that we have to be careful about.
Yeah, it's one thing, and that's one of the things I wanted to emphasize, that we have individual cities who do things and get sued, and they win in district court because they have the power, court granted power under that general welfare clause in the municipal code. We lose that if they take away, if the legislature narrows us down and goes back to where we only have the power that's specifically granted to us in the state code. So there is a risk that we educate the legislature to a point where they say, we really ought to have more of a mother may I kind of local government, where they have to come to us first and ask permission before they come up with these crazy ideas.
We have some legislators that already filled out.
Right.
Yeah.
But they don't know that our power that they can take away. They don't know that they can take away our power.
There's one who said outright to me,
I know.
exist because we allowed
You're
you
a
to
creature of the
exist.
state.
We created you and we can take you away.
But here's the disconnect. And then this is part of what Dave was pointing at. That senator, because I know who you're talking about, that senator will go to a national conference where they will learn about preemption. And in that national conference, it's focused on Dillon rule states, where those cities really are creatures of the state, and the state gives them permission to govern. Then he comes back and says, I give you permission to govern. And that's not true. That is legally wrong.
I also had a representative say it to me as well. I know
Yep.
what you're talking about, there's others.
Yeah,
Say it
yeah.
outright.
It is legally wrong. You are not creatures of the state in the state of Utah. However, if we try to correct the record with those individuals, we run into what Gary's saying. We say, oh, well, then let's scale it back, because again, it's. we
Then
have
let's
our-
make you creatures of the
Right.
Yeah.
I just,
I
so
know, it's a fine line.
I think we just need to be careful when we craft the resolution. Who's our intended audience and how's it going to be used? If the intended audience is to explain the virtues of local control, then I think that's positive. If it's to try and assert our authority with the legislature that already wants to pare it back, I think that might be the wrong approach.
I think that's exactly right. I think, and I appreciate it. We need to enable our friends of the legislature to speak for us better. We've got to embolden them to say, I believe that the local city council can make better decisions on this issue. I'm standing with them. You know, because.
And there are a lot that do say that.
Yeah.
I mean, look at all the silly, and I don't mean silly in the sense on the topics itself, but in the past. I mean, why is the legislature getting involved with whether or not Salt Lake City, how they handle their drive-ups for their drive-in windows for the restaurants? You know that.
The idling ordinance.
Yeah, if Salt Lake City passes an ordinance that regulates that, and some legislature gets a call from 1 or 2 restaurant owners, and we have a statewide law. I mean, that the rest of the legislature should have just said, no, this is a Salt Lake City issue, take it to the Salt Lake City Council. But they didn't. They just passed that law and said Salt Lake can't do it. Now, maybe it's good or bad. I just never understood why they even care.
So I worked for the governor's office when the grand staircase Escalante one was made. And if you think back, regardless of where you are on that issue, think about the outcry in this state about federal control in federal versus state. This is the same issue. It's the same issue, and there have to be parallels that can be drawn to that, which is it's a matter of elected officials staying within their lane, as opposed to saying, because I am elected, therefore I have an opinion on everything, and I'll go as far as my powers will allow me. I think it is a staying within your lane kind of argument and getting there. And I think that it's a big issue that there's got to be a way to communicate it in a way where it's disingenuous for state legislators to cry foul on the federal government and then do the exact same thing with the cities.
And we point that out, and I did that with one of my legislators a couple of years ago, and he was so mad at me. It's nothing like that, That's what he was trying to say. I'm going, it is everything like that. I compared something to Obamacare, and he about died.
Use the staircase monument. That's a more receptive.
Yes, it worked better in St. George.
I just add positive that we have a legislator in Toole County, Representative Merrill Nelson. He's come to bat for us so many times. He really understands, I think, local, like giving back a little power to the local people. And so I'm always hopeful whenever I talk to him, and he puts his head out there.
And there are quite a few who do. And so the question then becomes, and I appreciate this dialogue a lot because it's helpful if you do want us to start putting together a resolution, is how do you enable our friends to speak more eloquently on these principles without providing fuel to our enemies to burn us?
So just to follow up on my comment, we need to speak up. We need to say our piece because, somebody like him would probably have said it, but when we give them, basically support them in these principles, it's a lot easier for them to understand that, yeah, okay, I'm not alone in this. So.
Is there a way in the, resolution to be able to even, generally praise legislators? We appreciate legislators who,
But it would ultimately be the board's resolution.
Right.
So, and that's the part where we brought it up now because it gives us 7-ish weeks until the August board meeting. We could work with the officers or even a subsection of the board to kind of craft it and make sure we find that right balance. And so you could add whatever you think is necessary. The question though to answer is at the end of the day, is it a worthwhile exercise? Is it a resolution that would just go on the shelf, or is it something we're going to use affirmatively? And if so, how will we use it affirmatively? And is that worth the political risk?
Well, we're gonna try to capitalize on the elections. I mean, it seems like the kind of thing you would ask candidates straight up, do you want to endorse this or sign it or get behind
Except we
this?
can't, as a league, because we're a public entity, so we can't ask them to sign
But
it,
we can.
but you could.
And we can at least ask them if they agree.
Right. And then back to your question, Brett, about the target audience, I think the media would pick up on this in a heartbeat. I think they would really like a platform type concept, and you could carve out a little political space.
I think cities generally have better approval ratings than legislature.
Yeah.
Not that, I don't know what we
It's
do.
not saying that. Yeah. But yeah, and some of the,
Even holidays.
some of the data, some of the data that we gathered last year, it showed that in terms of who do you trust to handle these issues, and it was us. Governor didn't like it when I shared that with him, but
Can I ask Roger to take 1 minute, just talk about those other efforts?
Yeah, let me tie this in. In 1988, 1985, the Constitutional Revision Commission took a review of the local government article, the Constitution, and 95 all passed. But the focus for it, and this is what I want to emphasize, it was never to turn Utah to a home rule state. Utah's never been a home rule state, it never will be a home rule state. It was to clarify that certain roles that the Constitution articulates for charter cities that by and large we assumed all states have. And it was largely to clarify that distinction, particularly in the role and responsibility to provide utility services, public services. That has usually been the domain of cities. And it was to clarify some of those in that rated area. I only offer that caution in this regard. There are certain areas that have been historically our domain that we zealously could argue both for the policy and historically opposed. There are other areas that have always been the domain of the legislature. The authority to decide what taxes exist has been theirs. And when we start playing in the arena saying we're going to come up with our own creative form of taxes, then we run into that same challenge as well. So I offer that to say is if it's perceived as we're asking for newfound powers, then that's going to be viewed in the same fashion we view the legislature despite any kind of authority to regulate. It really is certain areas have been our show for a long, long time. Those ought to be maintained. It's when we move into the area of the legislature, you've decided you want these super projects and you're just going to override us. That's our friction. And so I really frame it in the sense that it really is not it's where are the friction points of what we're asking the legislature, what should they know here. So I offer that caution is that 88, 95, or 95 hours were really to say, let's acknowledge the status quo, that we've got cities who are acting as though they've got charter authority. We did not that way almost at speed. Let's acknowledge that and rewrite the Constitution so it says that. The reason that ultimately got killed had to be Questar, who thought it was going to be a legitimization of city natural gas projects, which nobody did. But that's all it took to kill the Constitution. But I only offer that caution here is I don't think we're asking for newfound authority. We're asking for recognition of the things that we've historically done.
Right.
And I think it's important that it not come across as we want newfound power. We just simply want what's historically just worked.
it's a reminder. I'm hoping they'll acknowledge.
So Mayor, in light of the time, if I think a motion of direction of putting together a resolution, if that's what the board wants, would be important for us as staff. And if that's not what the board wants, then that's fine. We've got the discussion.
Do we have a motion? And what I would like to see the motion say is that staff in conjunction with the executive committee would develop something and bring it back for our August 12th meeting for the full board to review. And we have it to you ahead of time.
And I'm comfortable too if other board members individually wanted to
absolutely
do it as well. We just don't have another board meeting.
Yeah.
So
we have a motion.
Second.
We have a second, a motion by Joel, second by Mayor Bierman. Any discussion on the motion?
I'll just throw out, I'm not, I think it's something we need to explore. I still have some hesitancies.
That's okay.
And I'm interested specifically in exactly what calls to action come out of the resolution, but I definitely think it's worth exploring.
That's highly appropriate. Thank you. And you know, again, we're just looking at this right now. We'll see how it goes. And if it comes back and we have too many concerns, then, you know, we can hold back or we can modify it, whatever we want to do. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you on the phone. Thank you. The motion passes. We just agreed to take over the State House. Mayor Caldwell just walked back in, so I just want to know what we all did. No, we just said that we would have staff, executive committee, and anyone else on the board would like to kind of weigh in on crafting that resolution. We'll bring it back for the August 12th board meeting for consideration.
So,
All right.
So Mayor, there are three things left on the agenda we need to touch on. My request is instead of ending at 2, we end at 2:10, and we should be able to get them all.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so
Rachel?
Rachel for land use. Yeah.
Land use.
Sure. I'll be very brief. So the land use task force process is underway for this interim. We've had a couple of meetings in conjunction with the Property Rights Coalition and then a couple of meetings just as a home team. Two issues I wanted to bring before you that have to do with requests made by the Property Rights Coalition. The first one has become somewhat of a perennial request from the Property Rights Coalition, and that is the issue of penalties on elected officials who willfully or in bad faith either deny a land use application or direct staff to somehow deny a land use application. This is by the reports of the PRC, the #1 issue that their members are asking them to pursue this year. They have said, you know, we've done good things in terms of clarifying LEPA over the last couple of years. The members are now coming to us and saying, we are seeing often, time again, where elected officials are willfully violating the land use code when we come to them. We've also heard from the Property Rights Ombudsman that he sees this often, although I haven't gotten details from him. I know that you guys have, or at least staff definitely has, and some members of this board have discussed this issue before. And what we're being told is, you know, this is coming to a head, we're seeing it all over the place. So I raised that issue because at our last meeting, we've been pressing the Property Rights Coalition for details. When is this actually happening? How give us some details on this as opposed to these sort of vague allegations of this happens all the time. I have a couple of concrete examples that I haven't double checked into, but a couple of concrete examples that we could talk about. But what we're hoping to get a sense from you is this even a conversation that we should be having? And I can give you a couple of ideas and thoughts from various sources on what these penalties would look like, if that would be helpful. So first is this idea that a penalty would be sort of akin to a penalty in grandma. So under the Government Records Management Act, if an official either accidentally discloses a record that shouldn't be disclosed or refuses to disclose a record that should be disclosed, that opens you up to a Class B misdemeanor. The second thing that's kind of floating around, and these are in no particular order. Second idea or thought is that this would be a willful violation or a violation in bad faith would be added to a potential Ethics Act violation. So it wouldn't be a criminal penalty per se, but this would be something where an individual could bring an Ethics Act violation against the public official, not currently allowed under the Public Employees Ethics Act. Another idea is that we would amend the Government Immunity Act to basically say that you wouldn't be immune if you willfully or in bad faith violate a land use ordinance. And then the final thing that's been talked about, at least that I have on my list, and Meg can please feel free to chime in if I'm missing things, is an idea that kind of parallels what we did this past year in the Ombudsman statute, where this past year in the Ombudsman statute, we clarified that if a party requests an opinion from the property rights ombudsman, and the property rights ombudsman sides with that party, and then the other party sues eventually under the same facts, and the ultimate result of the litigation is the result is the same as what the property rights ombudsman would have decided, the prevailing party would be entitled to attorney's fees to capture that time between the time that the ombudsman statute or the ombudsman issued his opinion and the ultimate litigation. A similar idea is that if the prevailing party could prove damages, that the party would be entitled to damages too, for example, delay of time, other hard costs that they could prove. I think, you know, we would, of course, if we're even going down this path, we want to negotiate that the government entity would also be entitled to provable damages too at that point. So just to, you know, reiterate, this isn't something where, you know, this is a discretionary decision. This is an issue where allegedly in various cases, elected officials are saying, I know what the standard is, I know what our ordinance says, I don't care, I want to put additional burdens on the applicant, or I want the applicant to do additional things or other things outside of what the statute requires. Does that make sense?
I'm wondering, of course, the legislature will make this apply to themselves as well. Yeah.
I mean, you bring up I think you bring up a really important political point of if you're setting a precedent where elected officials are being penalized for making decisions, that is not a good precedent for any elected official, right? So this is, you know, I think among our home team, kind of our brain trust, you know, our guys who've been doing things forever, they think that, you know, politically, penalties, particularly criminal penalties, are never going to really fly at the legislature. We, in good faith, wanted to bring this up with this board before we are even having further conversations with the Property Rights Coalition on this. You know, we're hearing that this is this major problem and they're going to make this push. So that's my question to you is, what do you think? What do you think about some of these actions?
I have a question. You said it's not, when you say it's not subjective, but I think it absolutely is subjective because anyone who brings me to, I think anyone who brings an application, if it's not approved, and say, we have a lawsuit in our city right now over approving a dense community, 55 and older community, and we're being sued over it because they think they are claiming it didn't take any time, that we just didn't, you know, the city council obviously just approved this on a whim. That could not be farther from the truth. But that's their claim, that's their belief because they don't like it. It's subjective, right? There's always two sides to every story. So I think this makes it impossible for city councils to do their thing. Although I couldn't agree more. You don't go against what your rules are. You can't. No one should ever do that. But I'd be interested in hearing the examples of that. But that said, I don't know. I think it's totally subjective, and then who makes the decision as to whether or not they were trying to willfully be wrong, which is, you know, person who this plaintiff who brought the lawsuit, a resident who's trying to sue us, and we have all of the proof to say, of course, that was not the case, but they think it is. You know,
yeah.
I don't know.
Thanks, Mary. And it's a couple of examples that we talked about the other day, or, you know, things where it's on the record where the elected official says, I know what our ordinance says, you know, I don't care, I'm going to vote no. That sort of.
Well, something willful like that is just outright wrong.
Yeah, but can't they already deal with that?
It's enough of a problem that this needs to become a thing.
Wait for lawsuit.
Yeah, I don't understand the need for this, and it scares the crap out.
I completely agree. There's already a remedy.
Yeah.
It's the courts.
Yeah, and they don't like that remedy because it, you know, it takes too long. And what they're really worried about here.
Because they're not going to win the lawsuit against South Jordan because it's not accurate. It's not factual.
They're worried about that lost time. They don't really want the money from the damage. They don't want criminal penalties. They want something that says, if we have to sue you for making, you know, for making this flagrantly wrong decision and we lose 5 years, we want some threat for elected officials to say, do the right thing.
And then you've got everybody suing everybody.
Right.
Because it's so easy to do.
Right.
We all know that.
Right.
Somebody could say, you made that statement. You can say, I didn't make that statement. And you can't prove it for the most part. unless it's recorded or something like that.
How do they expect that speeds it up? Because the guy votes no, you say you committed a crime, somebody charges him, goes through the process, all that's offside anyway.
5 years later.
This is just a threat just to keep people from voting.
No, you're 100% right. I had that conversation again yesterday with my classroom owner saying, even if we set up some administrative process or something like that, it's not going to be cheaper, it's not going to be faster. So what do you really want here? And I think what they want is the threat of being able to recover those damages.
Nope.
But is that something we should be really, playing the game with or making our opinions known on that? Is that something that we should be really looking at? Because I'd like to know. I don't want to step out of what we're doing that's really productive in areas that we should be. But I don't know.
You mean, should we be weighing in on this?
Yes. Part of the reason I asked Rachel to present it to the board is this is an issue that the PRC has brought up to us every year that I've been at the league. And we've always said no, and we've always focused on other things. And we've even tried to address it by making sure the Property Rights Ombudsman's office have sufficient resources because they're the neutral third party and that cities and the PRC can agree to use. And we've talked through other remedies. But I think right now they're filling their oats and feel like they have some influence at the Capitol or they could push something like this through, and they have some bad facts that they could use against cities and maybe have a sympathetic audience at the Capitol. So when they brought this up again a couple of weeks ago, Rachel, Meg, and I agreed that before our negotiating team, which includes the attorneys of several cities in this room, before the negotiating team had any further discussions, that we needed to talk to the elected officials at the board, see if there was any room for discussion, recognizing that there are these bad fact patterns out there, and there may be some remedies out there that are not that harmful to us, but address their concern of having something. But again, we don't want your attorneys and your city managers who are helping us negotiate the PRC to get out in front of the elected officials on this one.
Well, I'd love to hear from Gary and from David in particular. What do you think? I mean,
I don't know the facts of the case they're giving. I can't believe that it's delayed. If what they're saying is true, is that the person was entitled to approval and some council voted no and said, I don't care what our ordinance says. They could easily have gotten it approved quickly if that's the facts. If what they want to do is pass a law that says if you vote your conscience, when the law doesn't allow you to, and you can be subject to criminal sanctions, I think that our position should be that legislators who vote for bills that they're told are unconstitutional based on their conscience also are subject to the same.
Here, here. That's what I said when you were out of the room.
I mean, we've got elected officials who are sitting, I know the solution to it. It's a solution that none of our members would like. The solution is that we get the politicians out making administrative decisions, that you leave it to your planners and your engineers. But in the smaller cities and towns, the councils like to be involved in things like building permits and subdivision approval. And when they're involved in those, they're going to make inappropriate comments, and it's going to slow down the process. But even in our sophisticated cities like South Jordan and Farmington, councils like to be involved in those decisions. And when they're involved, they're going to say, I don't like this project. I wish it was designed differently. I wish it was, can't you give us less density? Can't you change the color out? And that delays things, but are we going to throw somebody in jail for saying that?
I mean, we all push for our council members to be able to speak their mind.
Right.
I mean, sometimes we get a little silly if the meeting's going really late. We may say something that we wish we didn't, but I don't want to start capping with a city council member or even a staff member can say.
Right.
It's an example of operating with a sledgehammer when it requires a scalpel.
Right.
And that brings me to a question. Do you have any idea of the percentage of, is there a number that they're saying out of the whole state of Utah and every city council and everything that we approve, this percentage, or is it these 2 cases and they want to do this broad-based?
Yeah.
Everybody?
I'm glad you brought that up. That's something that Megan and I were talking about the other day of, they gave us a few examples, for example, Dave, back to what you just said. One example was where a project got delayed for 3 weeks. So I'm not going to get too upset about that. But, again, out of the whole universe of how many approvals there are, how many thousands of approvals there are, if there are a few examples that are, from a few years ago and things like that. It's just, I don't know, again, if this problem is as drastic or as serious as I'm hearing. So I'd like to sit down with the Property Rights Ombudsman and see if he would give me a couple of more examples. I don't know if he will, but it might be instructive for us just as a group, not to necessarily explore this issue this year, but just to know kind of some more details and facts about maybe somebody else a little bit more neutral that has seen this.
One of the things that I'm seeing in Farmington is as the state comes down and says to every municipality, you got to start going vertical instead of horizontal. And it takes, and you go into certain communities. Well, I can see that delay. I can see people saying, well, wait a minute, this is not something that we're used to. And I hate to think we're going to get sued or someone's going to say something to where that now ties it up in court. It's not uncommon in my experience and I am a developer, for some developers to come in and it does get delayed. It does get delayed. And sometimes it's clarifying facts. Sometimes it's, we're just not ready to deal with this because it's different. We're not sure. We need to research it out. So those things can happen, and they do happen.
Mm-hmm.
So,
our entire form of government everywhere presumes that local officials or all elected officials will comply with the law. I don't think that there's anything unique that says there's a susceptibility for city officials to be more susceptible to not comply with the law than any other elected official. And that somehow there should be some lower standard associated with this group than any other is ridiculous. And I think more the framework, our remedy for people not doing their job, if you go to court. There's a huge difference between not complying with the law and having disagreements on what the facts are, what the decision we're being asked to make, than those other issues.
Exactly, and there is enough in all of our ordinances. There's enough lack of clarity that we are opening a door by introducing penalties of a scrutiny on our ordinances that is going to be really challenging. And I think you start with one penalty and then it becomes more penalties as well. So that's my opinion is we should have a hard no.
That's building off of what Roger was saying now, what if the penalty was something related to damages or something after the fact that is after you go through that traditional remedy?
No.
Well,
I think as soon, sorry, I'm going to speak up.
That's why we wanted this conversation.
I think the instant you go to, we concede that there should be penalties paid for the act of for an act of an elected official, for which there is already a process, we're going to be opening the door to other penalties. I think we need to draw a line.
There's already a state statute that says that an elected official can be removed from office for misfeasance or malfeasance in office. If in fact the story they tell is true and they want to penalize that person for doing it, let somebody bring a claim against the official in court and say you ought to be kicked off because you did something that you purposely knew was illegal. But they don't want to do that. What they want is a threat so that you'll say yes tonight.
That's right.
Yes.
And I think as we see, I'm hearing good, this is good feedback. I think there are other remedies, and I think we just need to remind them that there are other remedies. More developments are happening under development agreements, and then those things are kind of taken care of by contract for delay and other damages. And so I feel good about this conversation. So any remaining questions might be good.
In the words of Gary Hill, is everyone okay with a hard no at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Second item, which builds off of that, and hopefully will be a little bit less controversial. Another thing that the Property Rights Coalition is requesting this year is the idea of mandatory training for city council officials and planning commissioners. So there would be a required, and they're kind of throwing around this number of 4 hours of required land use training for city council members and planning commissioners per year. Similar to what we do yearly on grandma, what we do yearly on OPNA. We think that this might be a kind of easy give here under the auspices of this is good government. A lot of our elected officials tell us that, and staff tell us that we need more land use training. We need more of, you know, what Meg has been doing for hundreds of elected officials around the state for many years. Let's kind of make that consistent. You know, the city attorney could do it in their city if they're doing their grandma and OPMA training. We can offer it at our conferences. Could be just sort of an easy give to create a little bit more understanding about land use.
Did you say this was the PRC was also pushing this?
It's a request from them, but not necessarily one that I think is something that we would disagree with. What do you think about that?
That seems high to me.
4 hours.
The reality of it is tough to do the 1 hour.
Okay.
You know, and every year now we have to do it. And how many of you do it multiple times over the year? Because you just can't. You're not getting certificates from the one. So I'm doing it 3 times this year at least. So that's, I know this is different, but it is not easy to do that. I'm not saying we shouldn't do any, but I think 4 hours is heavy.
That's asking. Okay.
Compromise there.
Yeah.
Because I recognize that this is something that might be an easy,
Right.
some low hanging fruit for us to work together with them. That might.
I especially agree
Might be better
initially.
than the other.
Yeah. I think initially everyone will have some, but you know, some every year. All right. We require all kinds of continuing ed stuff for attorneys and insurance salesmen and you know, all kinds of stuff, and I get to do some of that. But I think, you know, I don't know, an hour, couple hours, I don't know. I think 4 is heavy.
I would avoid time limits. I would just say mandatory training, and I would start with once a term or once every 2 years, which captures.
But I was going to say we have a conflict on this because this would be a wonderful thing because it is justified league conventions, league training, league expense and dues, and it'd be a terrible thing if you're an elected official and have to actually recertify. But from a league's perspective, to mandate that people get training, we would end up needing to train people.
Right. You could be. You are.
Yeah, I mean, think what it do to our, you know, get your mandatory training, you have to go to the league convention. The attendance would go up through all our things.
We also have to offer it online too, so.
Yeah, or our online stuff, all that. But it's so insulting. I mean, that you have to, the people run for office, put their name on a ballot, want to be a public servant, and then somebody says to, by the way, the voters have chosen you, but you may not serve unless we now can educate you.
I kind of like what Gary said along those lines. You will have some. I mean, you know, can you keep it as open as possible once a term? And you're doing it, I don't know.
How about something? I mean, I think it's a good concept. We could all use more training on one. But it does become a burden. There are a lot of these different obligations, and when people are elected, there's a lot of work they need to do. So I would recommend we start out with something incremental, which is to amp up our voluntary training and find ways that they can work with the league, that we can offer more training and market that better, and use that as a starting point before we start to mandate anything. I think a mandate would be a fallback point if we got to force things.
Mayor?
I don't know if our councils are any different than yours, but to get our councils to go outside, you know, the meetings that we already have. I mean, I struggle even being able to get into the league meetings. You know, a lot of mine are attorneys. You know, they're in court, they're doing all sorts of things, and they can't say, well, I can't take 3 days and go off. One of the things that I've found has been good, and I don't know if we can implement this. We have a study session like maybe most of you do, and we set aside time, you know, for our attorney to come in and teach us. That's a good time because they're already there, And maybe we could look at doing something like that, even if we said, okay, council, once a year, you're gonna have to come in a half hour earlier, we'll feed you whatever we're gonna do and have some training that way. I'm just thinking that when we try to train, that's the best way for us to do it, is almost during a study session. And then you pick the individual, whether it's a staff member from the league or whether it's a student or somebody else, that comes in and says, okay, this is what we're gonna talk about for an hour.
Yeah, we would not want to be too prescriptive on that.
Can I ask, they've been asking this for decades of us, haven't they? Why do we want to placate them at this point when we've successfully pushed back? And I think they're hard pressed to find a lot of examples. And if there are examples, there's recourse. Why do we want to move in their direction?
I think partially because it looks good to be proactive on, on training, on creating understanding. It also helps us combat the penalties issue a little bit too. Like, we will say, okay, yeah, we agree that those planning commissioners, they need some more training. We all need to have a greater understanding of what LEGMA requires. We'll give you this.
And I know the penalties would be awful, but do you really think that's a threat, a legitimate threat at this point, or more of a threat than it is every other year?
So I think it's slightly amplified this year is what I would say. Ultimately, I'm not worried that we're going to end up with Class B misdemeanors next year, but I think they do have a little bit more attention this year. I think the more they keep telling these stories, the more it becomes reality. So training is always kind of a why would you be resistant to training would be the argument, right? But don't we?
I guess the thing is, I feel like, I don't know how you are, I feel like we get training every time we meet. Our city attorneys I look to them, and in our case, he or she jumps in, and I feel like we're getting on-the-job training weekly or every other week for our regular meetings. So I think prescribing it too much is kind of offensive, frankly.
Well, and the mandatory training that we're required to do on the open public meeting stuff, that's not help on open public.
No.
You're right. I'm wondering, in our big picture fight to maintain some authority and to not be viewed as the enemy of housing and land use, whatever, the optics of this, I recognize might be of something, of being willing to say yes to something, might go a long way in that big picture.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head for me from my perspective.
Gary,
what's the next shoe to drop? It's mandatory to have it. Then the next logical mandate is what's the penalty for not getting the training?
Your audit.
It won't be a ding on your audit.
The other one is.
Maybe, it'll start there.
But yeah.
It makes it that much easier to say, well, look, you're not trained. No wonder you guys made a mistake. There should be penalties for mistakes.
Yeah, the penalties will never go away. I think unless we self-generate a solution that we like, which I don't think we're close to there yet, I don't think we're not going to hear the request for penalties. So I think it's a good point. Are we opening ourselves up to another thing to be penalized on?
The penalty for failure of action on elected officials should be put out of office. I'm starting with the basic dynamic of people running for offices. You agree that's what it is.
And that's why the land use commission is looking for something else, is because these people who are supposedly doing wrong to the land use people are doing what the residents want to do. So there is the effect that there's more down that you might have to do and voting than you are proposing.
So again, I don't know if we got a new recommendation that we want to take to anything at this point. So
We can agree to push information.
push it on my rate would be let's plan for ramp up. We were offering
elected who are elected and tell them we're going to do the following things or so that are doing, let's not do and see how that
There, or continue. That's probably what we need.
I recognize coming from a PR standpoint and giving a little bit on this is going to I mean, the narrative is so loud. Cities are the enemy. You know, we're not doing that. We don't care that we don't want to all the stuff we hear. And that's bigger on the well, we even ask for more teams training that way. Training people won't even do that. All these things. Or I just think that's so I just like you can't do it. Or if they say this is what they want, but at least we're not saying, okay, we'll do more hours, you know?
That's, I think we can do voluntarily without mandates kind of thing. And the legislature mandating something. All our, we can fight at that point. We can agree at that point, whatever, but I don't know why we would cave at this point.
Let's be ready to tell our own story too.
Yep.
I mean, they maybe can come up with a few examples that they can point to, but how many hundreds of people do you train a year, right? Traveling around the state on these exact issues. That's a story. We
Let's get the
out there and
data.
counter their few horse stories.
It's great training.
Yeah.
And most of the people they're complaining about have been trained.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not complaining about
It's true.
these rural places that don't show up at our training. They're complaining mostly about high growth cities with very active councils and planners and all that, that have received training from us and been there.
Thank you, everybody, for your help on this. We need to wrap it up. What else do we need to do?
Last thing, Dave, did Susan talk to you about the website contract?
Talk to me.
Yeah, did she talk to you?
Yes.
Ended up just over 50,000.
Yeah. So,
which is a good deal.
Yeah, according to our internal policies, I cannot sign something that's over 50,000 unless it's time sensitive and process related. Mayor Pike has to do it above between 25 and 50, and then above 50, he can sign it, but the board has to be aware of it. We got the bid from the from Granicus yesterday. Yeah. So the contract is slightly over 50,000, which is why we needed to make sure the board was aware, and then Mayor Pike and I can both sign it on behalf of the league so that we can finalize our modernization of the website.
And when I talked to Susan, she was pleased with this.
Yep.
We're
very comfortable with
25,000 less than the other bid.
Yep. The one thing to add is that there will still be a member management service component, and that's where the tracking of university and being able to understand the profile of membership will be part of that. So this is not the final cost for everything website related. This will be for the main rebuild. So we just needed to check that box at the policies. So no.
That's great.
Right. We got this yesterday. I think it'd be good to have a motion just to move we authorize this to be signed or approved.
Second.
Motion by Brett, second by Mayor Caldwell. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We need a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
We are adjourned. We took every minute of our 3 hours. We didn't intend to. Sorry about that.
Thanks, everyone online. Thanks for joining us. We will see you in August.
Thank you.
How's everything? Park safety and snow melt that. 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 Safety and snow melt that.